Welcome to the True Tomorrows podcast. I'm Adrian Smith, and I'll be your host for this wild ride into the future.
I'm Julia Jones, ready to navigate the twists and turns of science and AI and all the unexpected what-ifs that come along with them.
We're so glad you could join us for this daily adventure as we unpack a new story ripped from the headlines of tomorrow.
Think of us as your guides, helping you sort the future from science fiction.
Oh, and with a healthy dose of humor along the way.
Absolutely.
Buckle up and get ready to explore the dark side of tech.
And all the fascinating possibilities it unlocks.
Don't forget to rate and follow the show.
That way you won't miss out on any of our captivating tomorrow stories.
Speaking of captivating, today's story drops us right into a world where humanity's attempt to control the weather, well, it backfires spectacularly.
You sent us this story called Winter's Heart.
Yeah.
It throws us headfirst into a world in the grip of a catastrophic ice age, but not from some natural cycle.
Nope. This deep freeze is all thanks to corporations pushing their weather control tech just a little too far.
The story really dives into the unintended consequences of wielding that kind of power, and how our efforts to fix things can sometimes make them much, much worse.
It's the law of unintended consequences, right?
Exactly.
Okay, so we've got a frozen wasteland, global chaos, and this new breed of humans who can actually manipulate ice and cold.
Frostborn.
Yeah, the Frostborn.
It's so interesting how the story mirrors our anxieties about climate change,
Oh, for sure.
We're already seeing the impact of our actions on the environment right now.
Absolutely.
And Winter's Heart just takes those fears to the extreme.
It's like a cautionary tale, right?
Yeah.
Showing us what could happen if we keep pushing these boundaries without thinking about the consequences.
What I find fascinating is how the Frostborn aren't just victims of this frozen hellscape.
Right.
They're actually a product of it.
Right. They've adapted and evolved in this extreme environment, developing these incredible powers, but also kind of terrifying powers.
Yeah. Exactly. And the story introduces us to some pretty compelling characters like Talia, who can use ice crystals to create these intricate maps and networks.
And then there's Yuki, whose touch brings on this bone-chilling cold, almost like the world itself is just dying around her.
Yeah, and then we have our unnamed narrator, the Weapon, who carves through anything and everything with this chilling efficiency.
Makes you wonder if such adaptations are even scientifically possible.
Well, the science behind it is definitely speculative, but it does raise some intriguing questions about human potential.
Like, could extreme environmental pressures actually trigger some dormant abilities or accelerate evolution in ways we haven't even imagined?
It's definitely food for thought.
Speaking of food, or rather the lack of it, let's talk about the Frostborn's mission.
Yeah, they're not exactly sitting around building ice castles.
Right.
They're fueled by this cold, burning rage against the corporations who plunge the world into this frozen nightmare.
I mean, you can't help but sympathize with their anger, can you?
I know their world was stolen from them. And their revenge is brutal and swift.
They dismantle these corporate fortresses and turn executives into frozen statues. It's almost like a twisted form of poetic justice.
But then the question arises, what happens after the revenge?
Yeah, where does all that anger go when the world is already on the brink of collapse?
That's a great question.
And that's where the story really starts to grapple with the complex psychology of the Frostborn, right?
Yeah.
They're not just these one-dimensional villains.
No.
They're struggling with their own grief, their own sense of responsibility for what's happened.
They're caught between this desire for vengeance and this glimmer of hope that maybe they can use their powers for something more, something better.
And this is where Dr. Sinclair comes in.
Yeah.
This almost mythical figure from the pre-freeze world emerges with this desperate proposal.
He believes he can harness the Frostborn's power to kickstart the Earth's heart and reverse the Ice Age.
His intentions are good.
They seem to be.
He wants to save the world.
Yeah.
But it raises so many ethical questions about manipulating forces of nature that we just don't understand.
It's like playing planetary roulette with the fate of humanity hanging in the balance.
This reminds me of all the discussions around geoengineering.
Yeah.
Using technology to manipulate the Earth's systems to combat climate change.
Right. Things like solar radiation management or carbon capture.
Yeah.
Fascinating ideas, but incredibly risky because we don't know what kind of chain reaction we might trigger.
Exactly. And that's the kind of dilemma that Dr. Sinclair and the Frostborn are facing in Winter's Heart.
Trying to restart the Earth's heart.
This massive undertaking that really pushes the Frostborn to their limits.
But as we'll see, things don't quite go according to plan.
The story takes this wild turn when the world doesn't just thaw, it convulses.
Mountains rise where oceans once were, islands vanish beneath the waves. It's like they cracked the planet's foundation.
And the kicker is they don't end the ice age. They accidentally trigger another one.
It's a gut-wrenching twist that makes you question the whole idea of playing God with nature.
It really does.
What's thought-provoking here is how the story highlights the cyclical nature of destruction and creation.
Right.
You try to fix one problem and you inadvertently create another.
It's a sobering reminder of how interconnected everything is.
Yes.
And how even the best intentions can have unintended consequences.
Absolutely. Winter's Heart does a brilliant job of exploring those consequences in a visceral and thought-provoking way.
Right.
Welcome back to True Tomorrows.
We left off on a pretty chilling cliffhanger.
We did. The world's been thrown into chaos not once, but twice.
Yeah, and now we're facing the consequences of trying to fix something that maybe couldn't be fixed.
Really makes you think twice about playing God with the planet, you know?
Right. Even with the best intentions, we can still end up making things worse.
And Winter's Heart doesn't shy away from that messy aftermath.
Okay.
We're left with a new ice age, a world totally reshaped by the Frostborn's attempt to restart the Earth's heart.
It's fascinating how the story dives into both the physical and psychological impacts of this event.
The landscape is unrecognizable.
Yeah.
But the characters are wrestling with their own sense of guilt and responsibility.
I mean, they went from victims to vengeful warriors to accidental world breakers.
It's heavy stuff.
A lot to process.
And then you have Dr. Sinclair,
oh, yeah.
who went from offering this glimmer of hope to facing the devastating reality of his plan.
You can almost feel the weight of that burden on him.
You really can.
He's a reminder that even the most brilliant minds can get blinded by their own hubris.
I think so too.
So focused on reversing the ice age, he didn't even consider the potential for unforeseen consequences.
It's the law of unintended consequences playing out on a global scale.
And what about the rest of humanity?
Right.
The people who survived the initial freeze and are now facing another one.
It's a whole new world for them.
They're struggling to adapt, forced to rebuild their lives in a world that's barely recognizable.
The story hints at these little pockets of survivors scattered across this frozen landscape, just clinging to life.
Makes you wonder how you'd react in a similar situation.
Right.
How would you even survive?
How would you cope with the knowledge that you played a part in this destruction?
Those are tough questions.
They are, and Winter's Heart really forces you to confront them.
Yeah, it's not just about physical survival.
No.
It's about moral survival, too.
Do you hold on to the values of the old world?
Yeah.
Or do you embrace the brutal reality of this new one?
Do you cling to hope
Right.
or succumb to despair?
The story explores those internal struggles in such a compelling way.
It really does.
And it highlights how differently people respond to a crisis.
Some rise to the occasion and others just crumble under pressure.
It's a good reminder that even in the face of catastrophe, there's still humanity.
Right.
There's still kindness and compassion and a will to survive.
That's one of the things that makes Winter's Heart so thought-provoking.
Absolute.
It's not just this bleak dystopian tale.
It's a story about resilience,
Yeah.
about the enduring power of the human spirit.
Even in a world reshaped by ice and loss, there's still hope.
There's
still a chance for humanity to rebuild, to learn from their mistakes and create a better future.
Speaking of the future, that's what we'll be exploring in more depth in part 3.
Yeah.
We'll be looking at the real-world parallels to Winter's Heart, looking at the choices we're making today.
And how they might shape tomorrow. Welcome back to True Tomorrows. We've spent the last 2 episodes exploring the frozen world of Winter's Heart.
Yeah, taking a wild ride through climate catastrophe and unintended consequences and the resilience of the human spirit.
And now in this final episode, we want to kind of shift gears a bit and look at how this fictional tale connects with the real world.
Because even though the story is set in this future frozen wasteland, the themes it explores are so relevant to the choices we're making today.
Let's start with the big one, climate change.
Yeah, Winter's Heart drops us right into a world ravaged by this ice age.
Right.
And while we're not quite there yet, we are seeing the very real impacts of climate change all around us.
Rising sea levels.
Absolutely more extreme weather events.
Shifts in ecosystems.
It's a reminder that our actions have consequences.
Yeah, and we can't afford to ignore the warnings.
And the story also highlights the dangers of unchecked technological advancement.
Right. The corporations in Winter's Heart were so focused on controlling the weather that they didn't even stop to think about the risks.
Their hubris led to disaster.
It's a cautionary tale about the importance of ethical considerations when it comes to technology.
Yeah, we need to be asking ourselves not just, can we do this, but also, should we do this?
Technology is a powerful tool,
It is.
but it's up to us to use it wisely and responsibly.
We can't let the pursuit of progress blind us to the potential consequences.
And speaking of consequences,
Oh yeah, Winter's Heart is like a masterclass in unintended consequences.
right, even with the best intentions, our actions can have ripple effects that we just never see coming.
Dr. Sinclair's plan to reverse the Ice Age.
The perfect example.
He thought he was saving the world, but he ended up triggering a new Ice Age.
It's a reminder that we need to be humble,
Yeah.
especially when it comes to messing with nature.
We can't assume that we have all the answers or that we can control everything.
So where does all of this leave us?
Well, I think Winter's Heart offers a message of caution, but also hope.
It definitely cautions us about the dangers of unchecked technological advancement and really thinking about the ethical implications of our actions.
But it also offers this glimmer of hope,
It does.
showing us that even in the face of these seemingly impossible challenges, humanity can adapt and innovate and find a way to survive.
The Frostborn are a perfect example of that.
They really are. Despite their flaws, they emerged from this shattered world and found ways not only to survive, but to thrive.
They're a reminder that humans are incredibly resilient.
Yeah, we have this amazing ability to find solutions, to overcome adversity, and to rebuild even when everything seems lost.
And while we may not have ice powers,
Or the ability to control the weather.
we do have something just as powerful,
What's that?
our collective will.
Our ingenuity and our determination to build a better future.
So as we wrap up this chilling exploration of Winter's Heart, we'll leave you with this thought.
Okay.
Let's learn from the mistakes of the past. Harness the power of technology responsibly and work together to create a future where stories like this remain cautionary tales, not blueprints for our destiny.
Thanks for joining us on True Tomorrows.
Be sure to rate and follow the show for more captivating stories from the future.
We'll see you tomorrow for another mind-bending exploration of what might be for